Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into Al-Bakara,
Okay.
the second and longest chapter of the Quran.
Wow.
Now, you might be wondering why we're dedicating a whole episode to just one chapter.
Right.
Well, Al-Bakara is no ordinary chapter.
Oh.
In fact, it's often described as a microcosm of the entire Quran itself.
It is, yeah. It
encompassed
covers a really wide range of topics. You know, everything from stories of the prophets, like Adam and Abraham and Moses, to, Islamic law and guidance for believers.
It's like a mini Quran within the Quran.
Exactly.
And here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
The name Al-Bakara translates to the cow or the heifer, a title that comes from a fascinating story within the chapter itself.
Ah, I see.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, so this story centers around the Israelites and their reluctance to sacrifice a cow as commanded by God. And their constant questioning and attempts to avoid this command actually end up turning what seems like a simple instruction into a really powerful lesson about obedience and questioning authority.
So it's not just about a cow.
Exactly.
It's about something much deeper.
Right.
And this theme of guidance, of showing people the path to righteousness, is kind of woven throughout all of Al-Bakara.
Yeah, you see it everywhere.
Yeah, and the chapter addresses both the pagans and the Jews of Medina, encouraging them to embrace Islam and offering a way to live a righteous life.
Yeah, a blueprint almost.
So Al-Bakara is like a guidebook for living a life in accordance with Islamic principles.
I like that.
And one of the ways it does this is by laying out specific laws and commandments. We see rules about fasting during Ramadan, the Hajj pilgrimage, and even dietary laws.
Oh, yeah.
Which I find particularly fascinating.
What is it about the dietary laws that you find fascinating?
Well, those dietary laws outlining what halal and haram might seem like simple restrictions at first glance. Yeah. But when you delve deeper, you realize that they often had social or ethical or even health-related reasons behind them.
Absolutely, yeah. Like take the prohibition of pork, for example.
Okay.
In Islamic dietary law, there have been links made to concerns about the health risks associated with consuming pork in certain climates and conditions.
Wow, so they were thinking ahead.
Exactly. It just goes to show that, these laws were not arbitrary, but rooted in practical considerations, as well as spiritual guidance.
That's really insightful.
Thank you.
It shows that even these ancient laws can still be relevant to our modern concerns today.
Yeah, a lot of them are surprisingly relevant.
Yeah, but it's not all about rules and regulations, is it?
No.
Al-Bakara is also rich in stories of the prophets.
Yes.
And I'm particularly drawn to the stories of Abraham and Moses, two figures who play significant roles in Islamic tradition.
Yeah, very important figures.
So what can we learn from their stories in this chapter?
Well, their stories are captivating.
Yeah.
And they offer really valuable lessons for us even today.
Okay.
Take Abraham, for example.
Okay.
He features really prominently in Al-Bakara.
Right.
And his unwavering faith, his obedience to God, even in the face of adversity, offers a powerful example for believers.
Absolutely. And one of the most striking stories about Abraham in this chapter is the one where he smashes the idols.
Oh, yeah.
What a bold act of defiance against the prevailing beliefs of his time.
Yes, definitely.
What's the message behind this story?
I think that story is so powerful because it reminds us that true faith often requires challenging falsehood.
Yeah.
Even when it's deeply ingrained in society.
Right.
Abraham's act of smashing the idols was like this declaration that there is only one God.
Right.
And that all other forms of worship are false.
It's a powerful reminder that standing up for what you believe in, even when it's difficult, is essential to living a life of faith.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that this challenge wasn't just directed at the idol worshippers of Abraham's time.
Right.
It also applied to those who claim to follow the scriptures, but have strayed from their true essence.
Exactly.
So it's a message that resonates across time and cultures.
Yeah, for every.
Urging us to examine our own beliefs and ensure they're grounded in truth.
Yeah, make sure you're not just blindly following tradition.
Not just inherited tradition.
Yeah, exactly.
And speaking of challenging falsehood, there's that whole showdown between Abraham and Nimrod.
Oh, yes.
The king who claimed to be God.
Yeah.
Talk about a clash of ideologies.
Oh, yeah, definitely a classic power struggle.
Yeah.
Faith versus worldly power.
And you see Abraham with his unwavering belief in the one true God.
Yeah.
Standing up to a tyrannical ruler who demands to be worshipped.
Yeah, he doesn't back down at all.
And through Abraham's courage, we see the triumph of faith over tyranny.
Right. It's a story of hope in a way.
It's a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming power, faith can prevail.
That's right.
But it's not just Abraham's story that offers valuable lessons.
No, not at all.
What about Moses? What kind of insights can we gain from his story in Al-Bakara?
Well, Moses' story is full of miracles and trials, from the parting of the Red Sea to leading the Israelites out of Egypt.
Yeah.
But it's also a story about the Israelites' struggles and their disobedience.
Yeah.
They constantly tested Moses, questioned his leadership, fell back into old patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
And to be honest, this aspect of the story is something that we can all relate to.
Absolutely.
Because we're all human and we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
It's a reminder that even those chosen by God are not perfect, and that the journey of faith is filled with challenges and setbacks.
So we have these amazing stories.
Yes.
But what else is packed into this chapter?
Well, there's one particular verse,
Okay.
2.255,
Okay.
often called the throne verse.
Oh, wow.
And it's this powerful declaration of God's majesty and power.
Why is this verse so significant?
It beautifully describes how nothing happens without God's knowledge and will,
Oh, wow.
emphasizing his absolute authority over all creation.
So it's really about God's power.
Yes, and it's a verse that's really widely memorized and displayed in the Muslim world.
Okay.
Often seen in calligraphy or as decoration in mosques and homes.
Right.
It serves as this constant reminder of God's presence and power.
It's like a daily affirmation.
Yeah, exactly.
Of faith for a lot of Muslims.
Yeah, like a touchstone.
And right after this powerful statement about God's absolute authority, we get verse 2.256,
Okay.
which declares, there is no compulsion in religion.
Right.
This juxtaposition seems quite deliberate.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
The placement of this verse right after the throne verse
Okay.
is significant because it really underscores this core principle in Islam.
Okay.
This freedom of belief.
Mhm. This is such a powerful message.
Yeah.
Especially coming right after this declaration of God's ultimate power.
Yeah.
It shows that even though God is all-powerful,
Yeah.
he has given humanity the free will to choose their path.
So it's about respecting individual choice, even in matters of faith. This chapter is really packing in some profound concepts.
It really is.
It's like a masterclass in Islamic thought.
I like that.
And it's not just the content that's fascinating.
Oh.
The way Al-Bakara is structured is also remarkable.
Yes, it's very interesting.
To understand this, we need to talk about chiastic structure,
Okay.
a literary device used throughout the Quran and particularly prominent in this chapter.
Yes, it's all over the place. You
Good.
see it everywhere.
I'm intrigued.
Okay.
Explain it to me like I'm back in high school English class.
All right, so imagine a mirror.
Okay.
Chiastic structure is like arranging themes or ideas in a mirrored sequence.
Yeah.
Think of it as ABC in the first half,
Mm-hmm.
and then C prime, B prime, A prime in the second half.
Creating this beautifully symmetrical structure.
So it's not just random verses thrown together.
Yeah, no.
There's a deliberate structure to it.
Yes, it's very carefully constructed.
That's awesome.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this structure is particularly prominent in Al-Bakara.
Yeah.
It's like the chapter is having a conversation with itself,
Oh, wow.
highlighting connections and emphasizing key points through this mirrored arrangement.
So it's a way of drawing attention to the most important messages.
Yeah, exactly, making them really sink in.
What are some examples of this chiastic structure in action?
Well, if you look at how the stories of Abraham and Moses are presented,
Okay.
you'll notice this mirroring effect.
Okay.
Their trials and triumphs,
Yeah.
their interactions with God.
Mm-hmm.
It's all carefully arranged to create this sense of balance and highlight certain themes.
Right.
For example, both prophets face opposition from powerful figures who deny the one true God,
Right.
and both perform miracles that demonstrate God's power.
So it's like these stories are resonating with each other,
Yeah, they're playing off of each other.
amplifying their meaning through this mirrored structure.
Exactly.
This is pretty mind-blowing.
It's really remarkable.
Yeah, there's so much depth to this chapter,
Mm-hmm.
from the stories to the laws to the literary structure itself.
Absolutely. It's like peeling back layers of an onion. The more you explore,
Right.
the more you discover.
And that's what makes Al-Bakara so fascinating.
Exactly.
It's a multi-layered chapter
Mm-hmm.
full of richness and meaning,
And maybe even a few tears along the way.
just like peeling an onion.
Right.
All right, so we're going to come back and we're going to delve even deeper into Al-Bakara.
Okay.
We'll explore more of its fascinating narratives and the timeless lessons that they hold.
Sounds good.
Stay with us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Al-Bakara.
Before the break, we were discussing the fascinating chiastic structure of this chapter.
Yeah, this kind of literary mirror reflecting themes and ideas.
Right, like how the stories of Abraham and Moses are mirrored to emphasize certain themes. But I have to admit, I'm still thinking about that whole thing with Abraham smashing idols.
It's a powerful image.
It really is. It's a reminder that true faith often requires challenging the status quo, even when it means going against deeply held societal beliefs.
Right.
What stands out to you about that story?
Well, what stands out to you?
Well, I'm struck by Abraham's courage and conviction.
Yeah.
He didn't just quietly disagree with idol worship. He took a very public and decisive stand against it.
He did. It's a bold statement.
Yeah, it makes me think about the times in my own life when I've had to stand up for what I believe in, even when it was uncomfortable.
I think that's a great connection to make. It highlights how these stories from Al-Bakara can be so personally relevant,
Right.
even thousands of years later. It's not just about Abraham's actions, it's about the principle behind them.
Right.
This challenge to examine our own beliefs and ensure they're based on truth is something we can all apply to our lives.
Absolutely. And it's interesting that this challenge wasn't just aimed at the idol worshippers of Abraham's time. It also applied to those who claimed to follow the scriptures, but had strayed from their true essence.
Exactly. It's a reminder that simply adhering to rituals or traditions isn't enough.
Right.
True faith requires a deeper understanding and a willingness to challenge our own assumptions.
So it's a call to be active participants in our faith,
Yes.
not passive followers.
Exactly. And this theme of active engagement is woven throughout Al-Bakara.
Okay.
We see it in the stories of the prophets, in the legal rulings, and even in the way the chapter is structured.
Speaking of legal rulings, there's a lot of legal content in Al-Bakara, right? It seems to cover a wide range of topics.
It does. It really lays out a significant portion of Islamic law, encompassing everything from prayer and fasting to inheritance and financial transactions.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
It is.
What's the overall purpose of these laws? Are they just a set of rules to follow blindly?
No, not at all. They were intended to provide guidance and establish a just and equitable society.
Okay.
They weren't meant to be burdensome, but rather to create a framework for living a righteous life.
So there's a reason behind each law.
Right.
A deeper purpose beyond just the rule itself.
Absolutely. Take the prohibition of interest, for example.
Okay.
This wasn't just an arbitrary rule. It was designed to prevent exploitation and ensure fairness in financial dealings.
So even back then, they were concerned about predatory lending practices.
In a way, yes. The Quran recognized the potential for economic injustice and sought to establish principles that would promote fairness and balance.
That's pretty insightful. It shows how these ancient laws can still be relevant to modern issues.
Yeah, and it makes you think about how much thought and consideration went into developing these laws. They weren't just pulled out of thin air.
Absolutely.
And I think that's one of the most fascinating aspects of studying Al-Bakara.
Yeah.
It offers this timeless wisdom that we can apply to our lives even centuries later.
It's like this ancient text is speaking to us across the ages, offering guidance and insights that are still relevant today.
It is. And the more we delve into its depths, the more we discover its richness and complexity. But beyond the laws and stories, there are also specific verses in Al-Bakara that have had a profound impact on Islamic thought and practice. We've already discussed one of them.
Right.
Verse 2.256, which declares, "There is no compulsion in religion."
Right. That's a big one. Free will in matters of faith.
It's a cornerstone of Islamic belief, emphasizing that true faith must be freely chosen.
What other verses do you think are worth highlighting?
Well, there's verse 2.282, often referred to as the verse of loan in women's testimony.
Okay, that sounds a bit more technical.
Yeah.
What's the significance of this verse?
This verse addresses two important legal matters in Islam: the proper way to undertake a loan and the status of women's testimony in legal proceedings.
Ooh, so it's about fairness in financial dealings and the role of women in society. I'm sensing a theme here.
You're absolutely right. Al-Bakara is deeply concerned with establishing a just and equitable society, one where both men and women are treated with dignity and respect.
So how does this verse address those concerns?
Well, regarding loans, it emphasizes the importance of clear documentation and witnesses when entering into a loan agreement.
Okay,
This ensures transparency and helps prevent disputes later on.
makes sense. Get everything in writing, avoid confusion down the road.
Right.
But what about the part about women's testimony?
That's where things get interesting. The verse specifies that there should be 2 witnesses for a loan: 2 men or 1 man and 2 women.
That's interesting. Why the difference in the number of witnesses required based on gender?
This has been a subject of much discussion and interpretation throughout Islamic history.
I can imagine.
Some scholars view it as a reflection of the social norms of the time, while others see it as a way to ensure accuracy and prevent potential bias.
So it's one of those verses that continues to spark debate and interpretation even today.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of what makes Al-Bakara so fascinating. Yeah.
It's a living text, one that continues to challenge and inspire us to think critically about its message and its application in our own lives.
This reminds me of that whole thing about the cow and the Israelites asking all those questions.
Yeah.
It's like we're encouraged to engage with these verses to grapple with their meaning and relevance rather than just accepting them passively.
You've hit the nail on the head. Al-Bakara invites us to think, to question, to delve deeper into its wisdom. It's not a text to be passively accepted, but actively engaged with.
Okay, my brain is officially full. We've covered a lot of ground here. Stories, laws, structure, and even some juicy verses that have sparked centuries of debate.
Yeah, we have.
What more could there possibly be to unpack in Al-Bakara?
Well, believe it or not, we've only just scratched the surface.
Oh, no.
There's still so much more to explore, including the chapter's unique perspective on the relationship between faith and reason. We'll have to save that discussion for our next segment. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of Al-Bakara, and I have to say this chapter is full of surprises. I never thought we'd be discussing loans and dietary laws and ancient literary structures all in one episode.
It's true. Al-Bakara is a chapter that keeps on giving. There's just so much depth and nuance to unpack.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something before the break that really piqued my curiosity.
Yeah.
The relationship between faith and reason in Al-Bakara.
Okay.
Seems like a complex topic.
It is, yeah.
How does this chapter approach that relationship?
Well, that's a great question. And what's fascinating is that Al-Bakara doesn't present faith and reason as like opposing forces.
Okay.
Instead, it portrays them as complementary aspects of human understanding.
So it's not about choosing one over the other.
Yeah.
It's about finding a balance between the two.
Exactly. Throughout the chapter, there's this emphasis on both revelation and observation.
Okay.
You know, it's as if God is saying, here's what I've revealed to you through the prophets and the scriptures, but also use your intellect, observe the world around you, and ponder the signs I've placed in creation.
So it's not just about blind faith.
No.
It's about using our minds to understand the world around us,
Uh-huh.
to see the connections between what's revealed and what we can observe through our own experiences and reasoning.
Exactly. Think back to those stories of the prophets that we were discussing earlier.
Okay.
They're filled with miracles, events that defy human logic and understanding.
Right.
But even in those moments, there's this invitation to reflect,
Yeah.
to use our reason to try and understand the deeper meaning behind these events.
It's like, okay, a burning bush talking to Moses. That's pretty wild.
Yeah.
But what does it tell us about God's power and the importance of listening to his message?
Exactly. Al-Bakara encourages us to approach our faith with both our hearts and our minds.
Yeah.
You know, it's about recognizing the limits of human reason,
Yeah.
but also using our intellect to deepen our understanding of God's creation and his will.
It's a beautiful idea, this dynamic partnership between faith and reason.
It is.
Each one informing and enriching the other. And it seems like this approach extends beyond just the stories of the prophets.
Yeah.
We see it in the legal rulings as well.
Absolutely.
Huh.
Even in matters of law, Al-Bakara encourages critical thinking.
Okay.
It's not just about following rules blindly, but understanding the principles behind them, the reasoning that informs them.
So there's this emphasis on understanding the why behind the what.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about blind obedience, but about informed faith.
Exactly. And I think this emphasis on understanding, on using our intellect to really grasp that deeper meaning, is what makes Al-Bakara such a timeless and relevant text.
Yeah.
It's not just a set of rules or stories. It's like an invitation to engage in this lifelong journey of learning and reflection.
It's like this chapter is saying, don't just take my word for it, think for yourself. Question, explore, discover. It's a call to active engagement with our faith.
That's the beauty of Al-Bakara and indeed the Quran as a whole.
Yeah.
It encourages us to be active participants in our faith, not just passive recipients of information.
This has been an incredible deep dive.
It has.
We've covered so much ground.
Yes, we have.
The unusual name, the stories of the prophets, the legal rulings, the chiastic structure, the throne verse, the verse of loan and women's testimony, and now this fascinating perspective on faith and reason.
So much.
It's amazing how much wisdom and insight can be found in just one chapter of the Quran.
Yeah. It really is amazing.
And even after all this discussion, we've only scratched the surface.
Yeah, we've just barely touched on some of the things in this chapter.
It's like we've opened this treasure chest of wisdom,
Yeah.
but we've only glimpsed a fraction of the riches it holds.
That's a great analogy. And what's wonderful is that this treasure chest is open to everyone.
It is.
It's an invitation to delve deeper, to engage with this profound text and discover its timeless wisdom for yourself.
Well, I know I'm definitely feeling inspired to continue exploring Al-Bakara on my own,
Me too.
and I hope our listeners feel the same way.
I hope so too.
But for now, it's time to wrap up this deep dive. Do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
I'd just like to leave everyone with a thought-provoking question. What insight from Al-Bakara resonated most with you, and how might you apply it to your own life?
That's a great question. Something for all of us to ponder as we continue on our own journeys of discovery. Thank you for joining us on this fascinating exploration of Al-Bakara. We hope you found it insightful and enriching. And to all our listeners, we encourage you to like, share, comment, and subscribe to the Great Indian AI Podcast channel for more deep dives into the world of Islamic thought and history. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.